Hello, everybody. Welcome to Jeremy Hadler's YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jeremy Hadler. And of course, we're going to talk about the sports industry because that's what I want to get into. But we're going to go into the more deeper side, the deals that get made, and behind the scenes. Of course, we have two sports agents here. We got Tim and Andrew here from MBS Group today. So thank you guys for joining.
Thanks for having us, man. Thanks for having us, Jeremy.
Pleasure to be here.
Of course, folks, you know what to do is to leave a like on this video, of course, like we did with Tanner last time we did with the sports industry. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're about 600 subs, so make sure to check out the content even more because we just hit 50,000 views on our latest video. So make sure to check that out. Let's get into deep dive here today, folks, because today we're going to deep dive into how to become a sports agent. If you want to become Jerry Maguire is what most people remember, or you just want to be the guy who makes the fast deal, wants to make all the nice money like Scott Boras in baseball, this is the place to be. And Tim and Andrew are experts in this field here, so we're going to be hearing from their side of how to get into this path, but also how the sports industry works on their side as well. So my first question I have for you guys is, how did you guys get inspired to become a sports agent, and how did you get started in the sports industry?
Yeah, so I guess the first we could kind of talk about how me and Andrew met. We've always played sports, grow up our whole lives. We played college baseball. I ended up going to a junior college and transferring in LIU, which is Long Island University in Brooklyn, New York, which is a small Division I baseball program. Ended up meeting Andrew there. We're great teammates. We shared the outfield together. After college, we've always thought about, we kind of have that entrepreneur mindset. And, we always want to do something. At first we were thinking about starting a turf business and then digital marketing. And then we kind of caught ourselves talking about, you mentioned, Scott Boras, Mulgeta, Jerry Maguire. And then we started talking about Ballers, the show Ballers. So we're kind of just like, we have a passion to be a sports agent. So that's kind of how the idea started. And then, I guess, Andrew can take the rest of, how we began MBS.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously piggyback on what Tim said, we met in college. We only played a year together, but obviously shared that bond and, continued talking much after college. So, I think we both knew we wanted to stay in sports at the time and just kind of figuring out what is the best avenue to do that. So for myself, I got into scouting with the Brewers. I did that for 2 years, got to meet some incredible people on the way and got to pick the brains of agents in the baseball industry. Lucky enough to cross paths with, like the Borases and the Balangis and the CAAs of the time. So, just getting to pick their brain and honestly just fell in love with the process on that side of things as opposed to player development, which is another avenue people can go to in sports. Tim and I put our heads together this winter and really kind of put all the chips on the table and started MBS Group. And honestly, things have been going great for us so far. With the changes in college athletics right now with the NIL, it just opens up a huge market for us, for this entire industry, honestly. So super excited to see where that takes us, along with, the professional sides of things too.
Nice.
Yeah, and I would also add too, is this, I kind of doing it unknowingly, I graduated in 2020. First year of NIL was 2021. I was lucky enough to where I still had friends that were playing collegiate sports, football at Texas A&M, and those guys were, hey, they didn't have an agent yet. It was so new, no one knew what was going on. So I was just running around, talking to businesses, getting them deals. No matter if it was small or big, it was something. And like Andrew said, in the winter, kind of something just clicked in my mind. I was like, we have experience doing this. We know people in the industry. We love doing it. Let's start it. So we started and we haven't looked back since.
Nice. And what does it require for you guys to become a sports agent, for folks that don't know how to become sports agents?
Yeah, so for us right now, getting all the certifications, whether that be if you want to be an MLB rep, passing that certification. If you're going to rep college athletes, like making sure you're state certified, making sure you're abiding by the laws of the school, and, just knowing the industry upside and down, more so than the parents, more so than the players, and more so than these coaches, right? So you're advising these kids on big life decisions and money's involved, right? So you really have to know the industry better than all your competitors, right? So I would say that's a huge thing. And just being really passionate and good with people, right? The big part of what we do is interacting with our clients every day. And, sometimes that's going to be negotiating a deal. Sometimes that's going to be talking about playing time. Sometimes that's just going to be off the field life stuff, right? So
Mhm.
just trying to be there for our athletes and the families when they're going through tough times or good times, right? So it's almost like you're a therapist in a way, trying to ease the minds of these kids and let them focus on their sport at hand.
That you can have all the certifications. You can have all this degree, XYZ. You can be book smart, but you need to be an expert on what on being an agent. Not only do we advise these kids, but these kids rely on us, for answers, and we have to know every single one of those answers that they ask, and we have to be prepared for those. So yeah, I would just say thinking outside the box and just becoming an expert in the field, and you'll be golden.
Nice. Go right off that answer there. What skills do you guys believe separate great agents like Jerry Maguire, which we all know from the movie, but in real life Scott Boras, from the good ones?
I like that question.
Like it too.
I would say being having the best interest in the player. I think a lot of agents kind of see kids as dollar signs and not that they. I guess they have it backwards. We work for the kid. The kid writes our checks. He pays us. We
Yep.
work for him. So I think a lot of people have it backwards where they want to find this deal or get him to go to this school because it has the most money. But what if the kid doesn't want to play there? And then when you're doing something out of his best interest, it's not going to work long term. It's not sustainable.
What Tim said was perfect. And I'll just follow up with, you got to really love this. You got to love the grind. You got to love being rejected. You got to work hard for those yeses, right? So I think a lot of people think on the outside it's this glamorous world, which it's awesome to work in sports, right? It's great. It's a dream come true every single day, but there's a lot of no's and there's a lot of rejection that come involved with what we do here. So, with our baseball background, right? 3 times out of 10 you get out and you're in the Hall of Fame. So it's getting used to those rejections and just keep getting up, and you got to really love it. And I think that's what separates good agents from mediocre agents and people that are just in it for a paycheck at the end of the day.
Love that
Yeah, I
answer.
would say I would say just being persistent and being consistent, keeping at it. Like you said, we had our Instagram page. We started from zero, and you see it now. We're in the thousands, and we started off messaging kids, messaging brands. Of course we weren't getting the big time guys at first, but we're starting to get there now. But that's just because we were consistent. We kept posting, we kept putting our faces out there. We're on this podcast now. So yeah, so it's just being consistent, and yeah, you'll see results later on.
There we go. Now let's get more into what the sports agent role really is. So, gentlemen, discuss for me what's like a typical day or week that looks like during a player season versus the off season. Now, obviously, agents have different clients every single time, but what does it usually look like for more off season for you guys versus in season for a player?
For sure.
Yes. So off season, we're more recruiting. I would say during the transfer portal window and the summer where they have more time on their phones and to talk. So I would say yeah, off season is more recruiting and then also reaching out to brands before like right now we have incoming freshmen for next year. They're playing right now. Once they graduate or once their season's over, we'll begin that process of working on their social media. The future brands going in and negotiating their NIL with the schools. So
Yeah, I think breaking up the 365-day calendar year, right? So you have to really pick and choose where you're spending your time for each sport. Obviously, right now, like Tim said with football, they're halfway through their season. They're the last thing on their mind right now, it should be is brand deals and contract extensions, right? It should be, focusing on their season, winning a championship, and, moving on maybe to the next level, right? So maybe I'll touch a little bit on the baseball aspect. It's the fall. Guys are practicing 5 times a week if you're in college, and if you're, playing professional baseball, you're off, right? So this is a time where, let's say you represent a guy in the major leagues, right? And he's not playing anymore. So you're touching base with him. Where are you training this off season, right? Where are we getting you to, get to that next level, whether that be AA, AAA, or the big leagues? So how are we going to get there? Who are we going to work with? and what do you need from me, whether that's equipment, whether that's, money for training, travel expenses, whatnot. So definitely picking and choosing the cycle where we're at. Tim and I will take turns, whether it's I'm working with baseball on a certain day, or Tim's with baseball, I'm with football, doing the brand deals. So it really all depends on just the time of the year.
It's kind of a mixture of both too. Like one part of the year we'll be working on, building our brand deals for football, but at the same time, their basketball's in a different season. So now we're growing that basketball pipeline. So that's where we're at right now. It hasn't been announced yet on Instagram, but we did just sign Sean Drummond over at University of San Francisco. He's a forward. So we look forward to him having a big year this year in basketball.
Kudos to that, gentlemen. Kudos to that. So going right to that, how much of your guys' time is spent on negotiations, like with contracts or brand sponsors, towards marketing, relationship building, client management? Because those are obviously the key skills you need to have to be an agent. So how much of that time is spent on negotiations?
For sure. So I guess I can touch a little bit on the brand side of things. Then Tim maybe can talk a little bit about the negotiations with schools and teams. But obviously, landing a brand deal isn't just a walk in the park and Instagram DM away that, hey, we have a kid. Okay, let's get him paid, right? So it's a lot of putting together a portfolio for each one of our athletes, right? So whether that be, articles, videos, highlights, things that we can really bring to a brand and show that, not only are we bringing you value, our players bring you value. Let's do something together because it's worth your time as well, right? If I just, say, hey, let's do a partnership with, let's just call it, Lowe's or Home Depot, right? They don't really care. They get 100 of those each year. But if I'm showing up with actual videos, actual links, actual highlights, how am I going to make your brand better? How am I going to make your brand money, right? Well, these are some of the things that take time. So, you'll get an initial phone call. Maybe it's a Zoom link with somebody lower in the company, and you kind of just pitch your idea and what you're thinking. And hopefully you do a good job at that. And then it gets to the next step, and then the next step. And then finally, we've had deals that we've done that have taken 2-3 months, right, to come to fruition. It's not just, a 5-day process. I wish it was like that. It would be make our lives a lot easier. But some of the brand deals, it's, it goes through a huge corporate chain, right? So I think that's what people on the outside don't really see, is kind of all those back and forths, all those Zoom meetings, all those conversations that go. It's important for the athletes to understand too, right? Like, hey, where's my brand deal? Well, if you're not in the industry and if you're not in, negotiations, right, those things take time. So sometimes we have to let our athletes know, just be patient. It's coming. We're working on it. But yeah, it's a little bit more of a process than just going right up to the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, right? So yeah, it's a little bit more intricate than that.
Just to touch base on that a little bit more, I think a lot of people have like Andrew said, a kind of a different idea of how these brands works. Like, just because you're a 5-star doesn't mean you probably will get Nike, but it's a bad example. But just because you're good at football, you have all these stats, but you don't have any content, on social media. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll get a brand deal. So I think a lot of people realize, like, you have to meet me halfway. We'll help you put out content on your social media to show these brands, because if you're not really putting out content and you ask me to go contact Nike, I'm basically just asking Nike for money. They're in the business of making money, not just giving it out. So we have to meet them halfway by putting content out for them. And, basically we scratch their back, they scratch ours. Talking about what's next? Contract negotiation.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm working on one currently right now. I can't say his name, but it's not announced yet. But he's committed to XYZ school, and there's some negotiations going on right now to where he possibly could flip. Those negotiations kind of work just with fair market value, knowing. And I guess the best way to negotiate that deal is having a IQ of what position and X amount of stars, what offers he has, what he's being offered from other schools. So I guess, the best way to negotiate the contract and to get the most, bang for your buck per se, is knowing his value, and the person that you're negotiating with will respect you a lot more because they know that their player's value.
Yeah, definitely. And to go right back into that, Tim, what have you found the most challenging part in the negotiation process when doing the negotiations with the schools, the teams? What have you found out for your clients?
Sometimes, I mean, these are 18-year-old kids, so sometimes they have a lot bigger number than what they're valued at. So it's kind of being the middleman and getting both parties satisfied. But if a guy's worth 200 grand, but he wants 800, I have to be honest with him and also honest with who I'm negotiating with, and somehow we can meet in the middle, maybe get him 250, 300. But I will let them know up front that this is their worth. And I would also say too is not leaving money on the table. A lot of people think that, okay, let's just negotiate his NIL with the school, and that's that. We'll do 250,000 1 year. Well, what about the signing bonuses? What about the incentives? What about the ladder incentives? Those types of things that people don't really think about outside the box, and that's something that we're not leaving money on the table. We're getting the most we can for this kid.
100%.
Definitely. Andrew, I know I've asked you this before we recorded,
Yeah.
but we've seen with NIL now with like the boosters, they're trying to get more insurance policy in case a player gets hurt. How have you seen that affect you and Tim with the clients of like when your guys gets hurt, they don't get like they get saved, the boosters get saved of like all the investment they put in that player for the NIL deals?
Yeah, lucky enough. I mean, we haven't went down that road with an injury yet. Knock on wood here. Never want that to happen, and never want that to be a thing with your athlete. Any one of them, right? It's hard for the athlete. It's hard for the program. It's a long process to recover. But at the end of the day, it's sports, and it does happen, and it happens frequently, right? So how are you preparing yourself in that situation? And I know, Jeremy, we talked about this and how insurance agencies are becoming, a lot bigger in college sports now, because you can see, the benefits for a school and the benefits for a player when an injury happens. So we have somebody we work with exclusively on that. So we're lucky to have them and work with them, have a good relationship, former baseball player as well. So, he kind of brought it to my attention, was like, hey, I'm doing this, you're doing this. It seems like a good fit. So it's great. And then we can bring that to the negotiations as well. And you'd be surprised, like schools like that. Right. So, take an insurance policy out on a kid, he gets hurt game 3 and doesn't play ever again. Right. I mean, if the school's paying him $750,000, I think they're going to want some money back on their return if the kid is not stepping foot on the field or the court. I would say definitely it's a huge, huge thing now. And you're going to see it more often. I think it's kind of a buried thing that people don't really talk about and don't look at on the outside. But I think in the future, whether it's, next year or 2 years, you will start seeing in, generic ESPN articles or on 3 articles that these insurance agencies are coming on board with, whether it be the school, the player, the agency, just to create value some way.
And I would say, yeah, too, that, and this is kind of off topic, but yeah, like creating value with the schools, the GMs, of, like he said, when you in these negotiations, because later on you might need them. So like, once the portal transfer comes, let's say we have a roster of 20 guys. Well, we know this at this caliber at an SEC school. Now I have a relationship with them. Now, once we're negotiating, I'm like, who do you want, on this list? And it makes our job a lot easier, their job a lot easier once you bring value to them. And, it kind of just all ties in together.
Yep.
What are the ethical challenges sports agents face most often, and how do you guys navigate them?
I would say just basic ethics in this industry is, I think Tim touched about it earlier, is, you have to disclose information. One, you have to be open and transparent to both parties in this industry, whether that's disclosing an injury, whether that's disclosing financials, whether that's disclosing a competing brand, right? The last thing you want to do is put, your player in jeopardy, or your company in jeopardy, or the school, or the, major league affiliate or whatever in jeopardy because you don't know the rules, right? So I think when you talk about ethics, is there's shady people in this industry, no doubt about it, that will try to cut corners. But, at the end of the day, if you don't disclose that type of information and you're going behind backs and cutting corners that way, it will catch up to you on the back end. And I think that's like, as an agent, I mean, you take these tests and, you read these books and, you go to these courses, right? That's rule number 1 is just basic ethics, whether that's to your client, or to the, sponsorship company you're working with or the team itself. So, just keeping everything out in the open and being upfront and honest with everyone.
Absolutely. How has NIL deals or social media branding impacted your work today with you and Andrew at your sports agency?
When we talk to brands, the first thing they ask is what's their following like. So that's something that we have to work with the athletes is making sure one, they have the following, two, that they're posting. Like, we have quarterback at Marshall. We got that deal done because he was a local athlete. I think he has like 13,000 followers. He didn't play a snap yet, but they trusted just because he had the following. He was always pushing out content, and that negotiation was actually pretty easy and quick. So just when an athlete has that social media presence, it makes our job a lot easier.
Yeah. And I think with the whole NIL, it makes this industry, I would say, a little bit more complex, but a little bit easier because you have a wider net to cast now. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when NIL wasn't a thing, right?
Yep.
You're a sports agent for one of the major professional sports teams, whether NBA, NFL, MLB, right? You're not representing college athletes at the time. You can be an advisor to a kid, but you're not getting paid for that until the kid signs a professional contract. So I would say this benefits the sports agency world, right? Because you have a wider net to cast, whether that be college athletes, college football, college baseball. We talked about women's sports, how that's growing, softball industry, women's lacrosse, women's basketball. Caitlin Clark is one of the biggest figures in sports now.
Yep.
And, before NIL, she probably wouldn't have seen a dime before that. Now she was at Iowa, getting Nike, getting Gatorade, right? So I would say in the grand scheme of things, it's great. It's great for the industry. It's great for the players, and it's great for the schools. It's just bringing in more money and more value to each and every single person in this game.
Yeah, and also I'd like to add, not only just does it help them while they're in college, but even after. And I'm not talking about them, saving money and putting it way out for college. I'm talking about, if they have interest in building a clothing brand, or if they want to make, some type of food, or some type of football cleat, later on, they've built that online presence for 4 years or 3 years at their university. So now they have an opportunity to, grow their career, something that they're passionate about off the field. He can promote that for his the whole 4 years that he's been in college. And next thing you know, he's a CEO of a company as soon as he graduates.
What are some things you guys look for in potential clients to bring them on?
Good question.
Right now, so I would say, I guess a little bit is kind of a story about me and Andrew. Me and Andrew have always been overlooked. I would say kind of the underdog our whole lives. Look at our roster right now. That kind of represents us. A lot of these guys have had to prove, time and time again where they were to get where they are now. I mean, Carlos, he was at Florida, and then he was at Syracuse. Now he's balling at Marshall right now. Our high school guys, one of them was under recruited. He just committed to UC Davis. So a lot of these kids are like us that were under recruited or not given the chance.
What you look for in that, right, is that tenacity and that drive and kind of that spark, right? So obviously the 5 stars, 4 stars, they're going to come and we're going to get those guys in. But, there's a lot of talent to be had elsewhere, right? You look around the NFL, the MLB, how many guys you see in the NFL right now are 2 stars, 3 stars out of college? A lot. Right? How many guys in the MLB were not first round picks? I mean, I can probably half the rosters on both the Dodgers and the Blue Jays right now are probably under recruited or, under scouted, right? So Tim and I think, have a pretty good background with my scouting background and, Tim and I's playing career. That's something we look for and listen to them talk. How do they carry themselves on the field? What's their work ethic like? Let me talk to their coaches. Let me talk to, people in town. Let me talk to people who interact with these guys on day in and day out basis, right? Like, let me see what this kid's made of. At the end of the day, I'd love to take a 5-star, but if he's a problem off the field and causing headaches for everywhere we go, it's not going to be good for his brand. It's not going to be good for our brand, right? So it's kind of just like recruiting a kid to college. It's what these coaches look for and it's what these agencies look for because, at the end of the day, we're taking a shot on you. We want to be confident in our investment. And I think that's same goes for a college coach or an MLB team or NBA when they draft guys, right? How, you hear in the draft rooms, what's his makeup? What does he do off the field? Is he studying film? Is he, going, or is he going out and partying, right? Like, what are those things that separate an athlete? And at the end of the day, that's, character and makeup.
Definitely. Wanted to get a fun segment because I could not get without this of asking sports agents because I've always wanted to ask a sports agent about this. You mentioned Ballers, you guys have watched that, and Jerry Maguire, which is
Yep.
based off of Lee Steinberg, who folks don't know is Patrick Mahomes' agent. The TV show and the movie, how real are those for what really portrays a sports agent in real life for you guys?
I would say, I mean, it kind of ties in with Ballers a little bit. Is a lot of people ask about financial advice, and when I actually first started watching Ballers, I thought ESM was actually the agency. And then I started watching it again. I'm like, wait a minute, they're a financial, advice agency, but they were working with another agent. So that's actually starting to become a real thing, right now with players asking about, financial, advice and, what to do after college, where to put our money. And, we've talked to a handful of people, that we're deciding on that aspect. So I would say that part of Ballers is starting to become real.
Yeah, I think another good one, I don't know if anyone's watched it, was the show Entourage with Ari Gold. Not a sports agent, but a talent agent. If anyone's watched the show, he's obviously a character and very funny, but it's not quite like that. But you see similarities in the shows, retaining clients, right? How are you, going about finding these clients and retaining them and making them happy? And what are you doing, on the negotiation aspects of, it might not be extreme and there's a lot less curse words involved, but I think that, those conversations with the GMs and stuff are real. You're on the phone, you're negotiating dollar amounts for people's jobs, for people's livelihoods. So take obviously everything with a grain of salt, but I think a lot of those movies and TV shows do portray somewhat accurate information in there.
Definitely. It's always interesting to see how Hollywood tries to portray and makes it fake or real in the aspect for the movie, like Jim McGuire. What are the best ways for potential sports agents who want to become a sports agent to build relationships with athletes and teams and their GMs?
I would say almost using the athlete to navigate you around almost. When we work with kids, we came in this, we didn't know the GM, but we work with kids. They, when they get offered from schools, we're like, okay, let's get that GM's contact info, and we'll negotiate your money there. And then it starts snowballing. And next thing you know, before you know it, you're connected with 30 different people, 30 different GMs at 30 different schools. So yeah, I would say using that kid to navigate, and also doing your own work too. We live in a world where the world's at our fingertips. I mean, we have LinkedIn, we have Instagram. Like I said before, we started from zero on our Instagram, and all we were doing was following, DMing. Of course, some people said no, but we didn't stop. We kept DMing people, and finally we got the answers that we needed.
What you just said there is like kind of that tenacity and tenacious attitude. I think if you want to break into this industry, I think I touched on it earlier, right? You have to be very comfortable with no. It's like sales, right? I think somebody said to me once, like, reach out to 100 people, you might get 3 to get on a phone call, and 1 person actually signs, right? And that's kind of how it is in this industry. So you have to have that tenacious attitude and effort and show up every day knowing that in the back of your mind, you're going to hear a lot of things you don't want to hear, but which, makes the reward when you hear yes, just that much sweeter. So I would say that, just knowing what you're talking about. I think a lot of people, whether you played sports or you didn't, I think it's very easy in the sports world to sniff out BS going through my playing career and being around high profile athletes. I think talking to these guys and picking their brains and what do they like, what do they not like, and when they don't trust a guy, trust is everything. I think if you gain that relationship and gain that trust, you're going to have clients and you're going to have people in your corner forever. But I think where people go wrong is they spread this kind of smoke and mirrors type thing, and
Over promising.
kids are smart, man, and especially student athletes, like they can sniff that out from a mile away. Just knowing my shoes when I was in it, I can relate on it. So just being authentic with each person and knowing that you care about them and not trying to be anyone you aren't.
Yeah, I would say being a resource to the kid. and not just, I think I said earlier, is being a resource. Like, hey, I can help you navigate, I can help you grow your brand. I can help, negotiate your contracts. I can help, land these brand deals for you, instead of looking at them as a dollar sign to say, oh, you know what, I'll negotiate your contract and I'll take, X amount. And, it's kind of, it's very transactional, and you want to be very relationship in this business.
No, definitely. And then to get to the last question here for aspiring agents, what advice would you give to someone trying to break into the sports representation, of like a senior kid in high school trying to find the right school, or is in college right now trying to figure out how to get that step and achieve that goal of becoming a sports agent?
Yeah, just do it. Me and Andrew, we're a little bit different. We started a business out the gate. If you want to start it, just go just start it. I remember when not, I was talking to other friends and like, well, you got to go get this certification. But you got to go do that. That's the easiest part of the job. You just go get it,
Yeah.
and once you go get those things, then the work begins. Then the fun part, the work, what I call it, that's the fun part, is, messaging kids on Instagram, going to a game to go recruit a kid, or me and Andrew are going to Vegas next June to go meet all these brands at AthleteCon for Sam Green. So finding things like that's it's the hard part, but that's the fun part. The easiest part is getting certified. You just go do it. So yeah, I would say my advice is, if you have it in your mind, go for it. Don't wait.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of people have preconceived notions and doing things in order and steps, right? Like I have to, apply here, apply there. Like, do that. Great. That's awesome. Like apply everywhere, put your name out there. But again, this industry is going to come with a lot of no's, right? So if you really want to do it, right, who are these agencies going to see? A kid that applies once and goes away after a year, or, the person that is coming to me, once a month, texting me. Like maybe it's a little bit annoying at the time, and, he's blowing up my phone, but it's like, dang, like this kid really wants it. This kid is showing me, his worth. He's bringing me stuff. He's bringing me value, and, he's tenacious. He wants to be in this industry, right? I think it's, a thing with any job. Anyone can apply to somebody on, Indeed or LinkedIn and never follow through and just throw their resume out there. But if you really want it, the people are going to separate themselves. It's just like athletics, right? Who's going to be better at the end of the day? The kid that trains and hits 7 times a week, or the kid that, wants it, but doesn't want to put in that work. So I think, obviously what Tim said, and that is God's honest truth, right? You want it, go do it, figure out a way.
I also want to add is, use your resources. Sports literally runs the world. Like almost everyone is involved in sports some way, and that's kind of what me and Andrew figured out once we started this business. It was like, oh, I know this guy. He works here. Oh, he's an agent here. Oh, this guy, he's the GM here. He does that. There's so many people that that you can use, and I think that if you are aspiring to be an agent, you can either try to apply for an internship at these big agencies, CAA, Rock Nation. My professor in college was Joseph Branch. He was with Rock Nation. I learned from him. But if you can't get those internships, reach out to people. Maybe even reach out to a GM at a college, or maybe a head coach at a high school, or me and Andrew. If you guys, if you DM'd us and want to shadow us for a day, or walk through, we'd be more than happy to do that, and walk you through the process of what an agency looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tim. I mean, kind of funny story. I think when I graduated college and still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my baseball career and what path I wanted to take, you never know who's going to respond to you, and you never know what these conversations will lead. So funny story. I'm just, messaging people on LinkedIn. I said, well, might as well shoot the Phillies general manager a message on LinkedIn. 2 days later, I get a text back from Dave Dombrowski, Phillies general manager, sends me his email, sends me his number, got on a phone call with the guy, So it's like some of those things that you might think are out of your reach are maybe not. So just reach out to people, never stop quitting. Just keep at it.
And to elaborate on like your circle, like what I was telling Andrew a couple of days ago, like look at our circle now that we started. I mean, it started me and him, and then we started talking to other people. Now, I mean, the other week we're on a call with Mike Mayock. He's the former GM of the Raiders. Then my friend Greg, I was at a wedding. His uncle's Mike Bibby. Now I'm connected with Mike Bibby. So it's just kind of our circle started this small, and now we're talking to big time people, and that was just from us just asking around, and somehow it led us to Mike Mayock, Mike Bibby, Shaq, all these kind of guys. So be a sponge, I would say, is soak up all the information you can.
Be a sponge, and if you ask for pennies, you'll get pennies. If you ask for dollars, you'll get dollars. So always ask for what you want.
Great answer, gentlemen. But that will do here, folks. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Before we head out, I'd like to give a thanks to Andrew and Tim for coming on, and also where can the people find you?
Yeah, so they can find us. Our Instagram is MBSG Group. That's our Instagram, and my personal Instagram handle is T Bechtold, TBECHTOLD _.
And then my Instagram is ASMITT_26. And then our email is info@mbsggroup.com.
That's it for me there, folks. But of course, make sure to check out Andrew and Tim. Make sure to check out their issue. They do a great job. And gentlemen, thank you once again for coming on. Appreciate it. And that concludes how to break into the sports industry, folks, of the sports agency specifically. But that'll do it. Rapper Studio. We'll see you next time, folks.